I don't see anything, not even black. That's a quote by a man who told about what it's like to be blind, a man who has been blind since the very day of his birth. His name is Tommy Edison. Blindness isn't just the experience of closing your eyelids and seeing darkness. It's the complete lack of any visual perception. And maybe there's a few of you who have actually had to experience what this is like. But for a person who has never experienced this, it's almost impossible for me to imagine or comprehend what that must be like. In our reading today, I think the disciples might have been having the same thoughts about comprehending what blindness must be like, because they walk by a blind man and they point him out to Jesus, but they ask an odd question. John 9 starts, "As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, 'Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?'" It seems like there's some sort of misunderstanding for the disciples here, because in their minds, sin equaled suffering. If this man was born blind, either he must have done something to deserve being blind, or his parents must have done something to deserve having a blind son. At least that's what they were thinking. But Jesus answers their question right away. Verse 3 continues, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus. "But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Okay, so the picture is clearer now. The whole reason this man was born blind is because Jesus wanted to display his power for this man and for the disciples. This wasn't the first time they had seen Jesus use his power to cure people, and so they're expecting Jesus is going to heal this man of his blindness. And so the story continues. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. A little bit of saliva, add some dirt, apply it on your eyes, and then go and wash it off, and you should be able to see just fine. If a doctor gave you that advice for seeing, you'd probably walk right out. Because this miracle of Jesus definitely fits his description that the works of God might be displayed in this man's life. Because sight restoration is not a simple thing. I looked into it just a little bit this week. You first need working rods and cones in your eyes, and then you need to ensure that the optic nerve is able to transmit signals back to your brain. But then once those signals reach your brain, the visual cortex has to be activated, and even still, you have to completely retrain your brain to perceive the images that it sees. And Jesus does all of that with some mud on this man's eyes. And honestly, we could spend our entire time this morning talking about how amazing and incredible this miracle of Jesus is, but the story keeps going. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath, which was a day of rest. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner perform such signs?" So they were divided. Then they turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "He is a prophet." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. So now the Pharisees get involved, and they don't like this. Nothing about this miracle was incredible to them. In fact, they despised the fact that it even happened. And these are religious leaders and experts. And we skipped about 15 verses in there where the Pharisees are basically using intense interrogation tactics to get this man to take back his story, And then in one final burst of anger, we read that they throw him out. But deep down, their problem wasn't with this man. It was with Jesus. Jesus couldn't be the one that did all this, they thought. Because first of all, Jesus did this miracle on the Sabbath. Jesus broke the Pharisees' special rules about this day of rest, and in their minds, that made Jesus a sinner. So because Jesus did this miracle on the Sabbath, he couldn't be the one, they couldn't see Jesus as the one who did this miracle because he did it on the Sabbath, making him a lawbreaker and a sinner. But their reaction to this miracle was still a symptom of something much worse. It was a symptom of spiritual blindness. They could not see Jesus. They couldn't see him as the one who did this miracle, and they definitely couldn't see him as their Savior. Because they had been waiting for a while for a Savior. But the problem with Jesus was that he didn't fit their definition of a Savior. Because they couldn't see the Savior that they needed. The even deeper problem was that they were completely blind to their own sin. These are religious leaders, religious experts, and these were people who were adamant about following every single one of the laws perfectly, and they prided themselves on that. So why would somebody like that want a Savior who forgives sins? They didn't think they needed that. Instead, they wanted a Savior who would praise them for their good deeds and who would help them defeat all of their enemies. What they could not see is that their self-righteousness only blinded them more. They could not see that their way of thinking completely covered them in sin. They could not see just how deeply they needed Jesus. I said before that blindness is the complete lack of any visual perception. What are you spiritually blind to? What things are you not seeing that are making you spiritually blind? Maybe there's some sins that repeated day after day and month after month and year after year, maybe they don't feel like a big deal anymore. They don't seem to be impacting anyone. They certainly don't seem to be hurting anyone. Do you realize that you're sinful? That's probably an easy question. But do you ever think that there's got to be people who are worse sinners than you? I mean, there's got to be somebody who's worse. That's the sort of things we like to think. How about when you see somebody going through any amount of suffering? You see the suffering, but then you think about the life that they've lived. You think about what they've done. You think about how you've seen them treat people. And maybe for a moment you're thinking that they deserve the suffering that they're going through, I think. Or how about when you go through suffering? In those moments, does it ever feel like you deserve much better than this? You don't deserve to be going through that? All of these thoughts, all of these feelings about what we do deserve or what we don't deserve, or this comparison of others being worse sinners than us, these are all symptoms of spiritual blindness. We've all got it. If we don't see the ugliness of our sin and just how badly we need Jesus as a Savior, then we're missing out on the beauty of Jesus' forgiveness. If we don't see just how deep our problem of sin is, then we're missing out on the depth of Jesus' love for us. Because the story goes on and it shows how Jesus operates. Verse 35 continues, Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. And when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. The miracle performed at the beginning of the story was definitely something that only Jesus could do. But this is the even greater miracle. Because this man had now been cured of both kinds of blindness, first physical and now spiritual. As Jesus reveals himself to the man now sees Jesus as his Savior. He now sees Jesus as the one who meets all of his deepest needs, as the one who cures his most dangerous blindness. And what Jesus does with this man is what he wants to do with each and every one of us. Jesus wants us to see how blind we are. He wants us to see how totally covered in sin we are. But when we look at our sin, when we see how blind we are, Jesus doesn't leave us there because he also wants us to see our Savior. He doesn't let us fall into guilt and shame. He doesn't let us fall into despair and terror about our sin and blindness. Instead, Jesus forgives. He opens our eyes to see him perfectly. And this is the greatest miracle. It's cool to think about the complete reworking of this man's eyes and brain and ability to perceive images. But think of the miracle that Jesus does with our hearts. He takes our hearts, covered in sin, completely blind and dead with all the wrongs that we've done. And he cleanses that sin, and he gives life and sight to something that was once dead. He takes our hearts and connects us to himself as the source of life, and he gives us the sight to see him perfectly. He gives us the ability to say what only a person who sees can say. Lord, I believe. This is the greatest work of God. This is the work of God that Jesus had in mind to do with that blind man that day. This is the work of God that Jesus has in mind to do in all of our hearts. And to add to that, this is the work of God that he chooses to have us be a part of in the lives of others. Because did you catch what Jesus said before? He said, as long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Jesus doesn't want us to just have spiritual sight. He wants us to use our spiritual sight. He wants us to be like the blind man and witness to skeptics, people like the Pharisees, about how we can see now. He wants us to go to people in our lives that we know are still blind and show them the source of our spiritual sight. There's probably people in your life who have questions about Jesus, but they honestly just don't know who to ask. Jesus wants you to be that person. Every relationship that you have, in fact, even every interaction that you have, is an opportunity to show someone that you see now, and you want them to see their Savior too. So if blindness is the complete lack of any visual perception, then spiritual sight has to be the opposite. It's not just having your eyes opened, but it's seeing with perfect clarity how much you need your Savior and how much Jesus meets that need. It's seeing with perfect clarity that the greatest work of God has been displayed in your heart. Because you were once blind.